11:51 p.m. on Christmas Eve. The text from Eleanor illuminated my screen. We have decided it is best you do not attend the gala. It is for the city's elite. Frankly, you are just a nurse. A second later, Liam hearted the message. I did not cry. I did not ask why. Anger was not loud. It was clinical. I opened their profiles and clicked block. Transaction terminated. Drop a comment and let me know where you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. I would love to know who is part of our community. Over the last 3 years, I had been the silent investor in their version of family. I funded Liam's 3 failed tech startups with my overtime pay, balancing the books while he played chief executive officer. Meanwhile, Eleanor dealt out subtle, classist audits of my worth. She would inspect my generic brand shoes and casually mention the pedigree of her country club friends, adjusting my value down to 0. Why did I stay? It was not love. Love is a partnership, a mutual contract. This had been a subscription, with me footing the bill. I was trapped by the invisible chain of the survivor. When you spend your entire life fighting just to stay afloat, fighting to scrape together enough for community college, fighting to prove you belong in the room, you develop a dangerous tolerance for suffering. You start treating emotional endurance as a badge of honor. I had confused their toxic demands with a test of my loyalty, believing that if I just worked harder, invested more, and endured enough of Eleanor's paper-cut insults, I would finally earn my equity in their family. But survival mode is a prison without bars. You get so used to surviving the storm that you forget you have the power to simply walk out of the rain. I rubbed my eyes, attempting to summon regret, but there was only clarity. This was not a breakdown. It was a balance sheet, and I had just written off a bad debt. The reality of the trauma ward on Christmas Eve offered the perfect backdrop for my sudden emancipation. 5 miles away, Liam and Eleanor were clinking crystal glasses in a ballroom saturated with warmth, expensive perfume, and manufactured elite importance. Here in the emergency room, the air was sharp, with the scent of antiseptic and metallic copper blood. The contrast was absolute. There were no polite facades here, just cold, clinical truth, and the relentless hum of monitors keeping failing bodies alive. I stood at the nurse's station, smoothing my scrubs, feeling completely detached from the people who had just discarded me. They thought they had evicted me from their high society paradise. They did not realize I had just liquidated my emotional portfolio with them. The doors to the trauma bay crashed open, shattering my thoughts. The paramedics were shouting, pushing a stretcher through the linoleum hallway with frantic urgency. The gala they were attending had just been violently interrupted. The keynote speaker had collapsed. Male in his 50s, massive myocardial infarction, the lead paramedic barked. He coded on the ballroom floor. We got a rhythm back, but it is fading. They wheeled him into Trauma Bay 1. I recognized him instantly from the news segments Liam used to watch religiously. It was Arthur Sterling, the billionaire tech mogul. The very keynote speaker, Eleanor, had been boasting about hosting at her precious Christmas Eve gala. The hospital doors burst open again, admitting a chaotic wave of gala attendees in crushed velvet and smeared makeup. Eleanor's social standing was heavily leveraged on this event, and now her crown jewel was bleeding out on my table. I slipped into my role as charge nurse with cold precision. Panic is a liability. Action is an asset. Push 1 milligram of epinephrine, I ordered, moving to the head of the bed to manage his airway. Get me a central line kit and prep the defibrillator. We are losing him. The room descended into controlled violence. Every second was a calculated investment of medical intervention. I did not see the billionaire. I saw failing mechanics that needed immediate restructuring. I administered the shock. The monitors screamed, then flatlined, then sparked back into a jagged but steady rhythm. I stood over him, my hands steady, watching the color slowly return to his face. We had stabilized the primary asset. As the respiratory team moved in to secure the ventilator, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I stepped back, stripped off my blood-stained gloves, and checked the screen. It was a message from Liam, sent from an alternate number. Why are our messages bouncing? Did you block us? Stop being dramatic, Maya. Mom is dealing with a crisis right now. The keynote speaker just collapsed at the gala. We need you to unblock us so we can coordinate. I stared at the message. They were not shocked by what they had done. They were shocked that I had stopped playing along. Liam still thought he dictated the terms of our communication. He had no idea that the crisis his mother was desperately trying to manage was currently breathing because of my hands. I did not reply. I did not feel the need to explain my boundaries. I just deleted the message and slipped the phone back into my pocket. The power reversal had already begun. They were still playing checkers in a ballroom, worried about their social optics, while I was orchestrating life and death in a trauma bay. I walked back to the nurse's station, my posture straight, my mind entirely focused on the patient's recovery protocol. The shift in equity was complete. They just had not seen the market crash yet. The following morning, the hospital hummed with the quiet efficiency of a holiday shift. I was charting at the main desk when the phone rang. It was Clara, Arthur Sterling's daughter. Her voice was strained but laced with profound relief. "Maya, the intensive care unit director said you were the charge nurse who ran the code last night. My father is awake. The doctor said he should not have made it, but your immediate intervention saved his cognitive function. He is asking for the nurse who kept him alive." I accepted the gratitude with professional detachment. "It is my job, Clara. I am just glad the stabilization protocols held." She insisted on coming down to the unit later to thank me personally. After hanging up, I opened the secure hospital database to transfer Arthur Sterling's emergency intake records up to the intensive care unit. As I cross-referenced his medical profile with his designated primary care physician, a secondary financial authorization file triggered an alert. It was a standard protocol to verify insurance liaisons for high-net-worth individuals. I opened his chart via the administrative dashboard as required for transfer protocols, and the trust distribution file was automatically flagged for my review. It was a charitable trust distribution report, linking his personal foundation to the hospital's educational network. I scanned the lines of data, my eyes catching on a familiar numerical code. It was the exact identification number of the anonymous nursing scholarship I had received 5 years ago. I froze. I pulled up my own personnel file and aligned the two screens. The dates, the routing numbers, the trust entity, they matched perfectly. Arthur Sterling was the anonymous benefactor who had fully funded my nursing degree. He had paid for my tuition, my textbooks, and my clinical stipends when I had nothing but a high school diploma and a desperate work ethic. The revelation hit me not with overwhelming emotion, but with the cold, undeniable logic of a closed circuit. The man Eleanor and Liam had effectively deemed too important for me to be in the same room with was the silent architect of my career. Eleanor had texted me that I was just a nurse attempting to hide me from the city's elite, ignorant of the fact that the absolute pinnacle of her elite circle was the very reason I wore these scrubs, and now the woman she tried to bury had just saved the life of her golden ticket. It was a structural twist of fate, so precise it felt mathematical. I did not gasp or cover my mouth. I simply printed the document, folded it meticulously into perfect thirds, and slid it into my pocket. The board was set. I held all the controlling shares. It was time to initiate the hostile takeover. By noon, local news networks had caught wind of the miraculous recovery. The headlines broadcasted across the hospital waiting room televisions were identical. Tech billionaire revived by heroic trauma nurse at Christmas Eve Gala. Eleanor, desperate to salvage her heavily mortgaged social image, rushed to the hospital. She needed to align herself with Sterling's survival to prove she was still relevant, still the gracious host who oversaw the entire affair. She swept through the intensive care unit double doors, trailed by a local reporter and Liam, wearing her signature look of manufactured concern. She had no idea I was managing the floor. I stood at the foot of Arthur Sterling's bed alongside Clara and the hospital administrator. Sterling was sitting up, pale but sharp-eyed. As Eleanor breezed into the room, her practiced smile faltered the instant she saw me holding his chart. "Arthur, thank goodness," Eleanor cooed, recovering quickly and completely ignoring my presence. "We have been beside ourselves. The entire city is praying for you." Sterling held up a frail hand, silencing her. He turned to the hospital administrator and the camera crew hovering in the doorway. "I do not need prayers, Eleanor. I needed competence. And I received it." He gestured toward me. "I intend to initiate a $50 million endowment for this emergency department and I want Maya to lead the steering committee for its implementation. Maya did not just save my life. She is the very nurse my foundation put through school 5 years ago. She is the finest investment I have ever made. The camera flashes blinded the room. Eleanor's face drained of color, her jaw slack. The social elite standing behind her began to whisper, their eyes darting between Eleanor's horrified expression and my calm posture. Word had already circulated among them about how Eleanor had banished her future daughter-in-law from the Gala for being unworthy. Now, they were watching that same daughter-in-law be elevated to untouchable status by the most powerful man in the room. This is the illusion of power of the empty wallet. People like Eleanor believe their worth is derived from the country club memberships they lease and the wealthy people they hover around. But that status is just a rented facade, an empty shell bought with credit and arrogance. When you strip away the borrowed money and the leased prestige, they have zero intrinsic value to offer the world. They confuse having with being. But true power does not come from proximity to wealth. It comes from competence, character, and the ability to act when everything falls apart. Eleanor had no internal equity to fall back on. As the whispers grew louder, her rented social currency evaporated in real time. She realized she had publicly alienated the one person who now held the keys to the kingdom. I did not gloat. I simply looked her in the eye, utterly unmoved by her sudden, spectacular bankruptcy. "Maya, please, we need to discuss this immediately," Liam hissed, stepping forward as the cameras shifted their focus back to Arthur Sterling. He reached out to grab my arm, his face contorted into a pathetic mask of desperation and sudden, terrifying realization. His eyes darted around the room, assessing the massive deficit he had just incurred. I stepped back smoothly, my posture rigid, allowing the physical distance to emphasize the permanent severing of our contract. "You do not have clearance to be in this intensive care unit," I stated, my voice echoing with clinical authority. I did not look at Liam. Instead, I signaled the 2 burly hospital security guards standing post by the elevators. "These individuals are not on the approved visitor list for Mr. Sterling. Escort them off the floor immediately." The hospital administrator, standing behind me, signaled her agreement with a firm nod, confirming that security had full authority to remove them for violating sterile unit protocols. Their presence is an operational liability. Eleanor gasped loudly, clutching her designer handbag to her chest as if it could shield her from the crushing indignity of the moment. "You cannot do this to me. I am the one who hosted the gala. I am a premier donor to this hospital. Liam is your fiancé." "Fiance was a probationary title," I replied, my tone entirely flat, stripping every ounce of emotion from the syllables. "And your contract has been permanently terminated for breach of basic human decency. Security, please remove them." I turned my back on them as the guards stepped in, physically blocking Liam and Eleanor from advancing toward the billionaire's bed. I returned my focus to the monitors, hearing their protests fade as the hospital staff maintained the integrity of the unit. They were not mourning the loss of a relationship or the end of a future marriage. They were simply panicking over the catastrophic loss of an asset they had severely undervalued. With the liability successfully removed from the premises, I turned my attention back to the work at hand. Over the next 3 weeks, the official launch of the Arthur Sterling Nursing Excellence Fund was put into motion. I did not just accept the honorary title of director, I executed a complete, methodical restructuring of the trauma department's educational and operational budget. Arthur Sterling had handed me a blank check to fix the systemic issues I had navigated for years, and I approached the task like a corporate auditor auditing a failing firm. I drafted strict, irrevocable protocols to ensure that funding bypassed the bureaucratic middle management and went directly to the frontline staff, the exhausted nurses working the graveyard shifts, the underpaid trauma technicians, the people who actually kept the hospital's heart beating. I allocated millions of dollars toward advanced simulation training centers and established full-ride, debt-free scholarships for medical applicants coming from low-income, working-class backgrounds. This was the ultimate execution of strategic, long-term justice. True justice is rarely found in the petty, vindictive destruction of your enemies. That is merely a reactionary tax that drains your own emotional reserves. The ultimate justice, the kind that alters history, belongs to the one who plants seeds. It is the profound ability to take the very resources your abusers tried to deny you and use them to cultivate a thriving forest they can never enter. By establishing this fund, I was not just taking revenge on a mother and son who thought I was disposable. I was rendering their entire brand of elitism fundamentally irrelevant. I was building a permanent infrastructure of competence, education, and care that would easily outlast Eleanor's fragile country club legacy by generations. They had tried to bury me by uninviting me from a single, superficial night of cocktails and networking. I responded by acquiring the very ground they walked on and turning it into a concrete foundation for thousands of others. Sitting in my newly assigned administrative office, looking out over the sprawling city skyline, I finalized the last round of scholarship approvals with a stroke of my pen. My phone had been blissfully silent for weeks. There were no toxic, demanding texts from Eleanor requiring my immediate compliance. There were no manipulative, half-hearted apologies from Liam begging for another chance to merge our lives. There was just the quiet, steady, uninterrupted hum of a life I fully owned, governed by my own rules and my own standards. Society often tries to define our worth by our zip codes or corporate badges. It is a trap. Eleanor and Liam were masters of this false accounting, treating me as a depreciating asset. But I learned that true pedigree is not inherited, it is forged in the trauma bay. By cutting ties, I wasn't losing family. I was closing a bank account that was hopelessly overdrawn. I redirected that energy into building my own fortress of character, realizing that the only contract that truly matters is the one you keep with yourself. Forgiveness isn't always a gift you wrap up and hand to the other person. Sometimes, it's the only logical way to set yourself free from a terrible contract. I do not forgive Eleanor and Liam because they have earned it, or because they deserve a clean slate. I forgive them because holding on to a burning resentment is an incredibly expensive luxury I simply no longer wish to finance. They taught me exactly what I never want to be, and for that brutal, unforgettable lesson, I am almost grateful. They handed me a match, hoping I would burn myself alive, and I used it to light my own way forward. If you have ever been told you are just something, just a nurse, just an employee, just a background character in someone else's grand, narcissistic performance, remember that you are the sole architect of your own value. You hold the pen, you sign the checks. You decide who gets a seat at your table, and you decide who gets permanently escorted off the premises. If you've ever had to cut ties to save your own soul, you aren't alone. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that they are enough. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice.